Welcome to the July 2021 meeting of CPOC. Welcome to members of the public who are with us for the first time since March of last year. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order. I think we've got an automated safety announcement.
Your safety is of foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen to the following instructions. In the event of an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room, and 911 should be called. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell D down the hallway past the elevators. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. Thank you, and have a safe day.
Thank you. Do we have members of the public ready to speak?
Mr. Chairman, we have two public speakers.
Terrific.
The first will be Jason Anthony, who will be followed by Murray Bowden.
Good morning. It's good to be back. Jason Anthony from the Congress of Essential Workers. After almost a year attending board meetings virtually, first time to be at 2 Broadway. It is good that CPOC mentioned in this month elevators. And this month, 149th Grand Concourse is in the agenda. It's very good because Ostos Community College is there. But what about Parkchester along the Penn line? That's my own neighborhood. That station is completely inaccessible. So you have a huge chunk between Penn Bay Park and Hunts Point without an elevator. So that said, a person has to take the BX5 bus from Penn Bay Park to Hunts Point to get an elevator if each elevator is broken. But what about 4th Avenue 9th Street and Park Slope? That station is a hybrid. We have one section that is above ground, in other words, the culvert line, and the other one is underground. That one doesn't have an elevator neither. So why not consider that one to have an elevator as well? So let's provide more accessibility to everyone. So I'll see you guys in the other meetings later on.
Thank you. Murray Bowden's next.
Morning. Over the years, I have been to literally hundreds of meetings. And the reception that I got this morning when I came here early was spectacular. We live in a changing world. And if anybody is doing the best job of preparing us for the future, it's the MTA. Pat? You've assembled a team that does their job properly. I have on the correct, so I can hear in my hearing aids. They've taken care of cleaning everything properly. This is the gold standard of which the rest of the world needs to come and follow. We're involved in global warming, and not everybody realizes that. I can't get my words right because of my mind's going, so I do the best I can. You've assembled a team that's forward-looking and preparing for the future. Most people are not preparing for the future. You are. The team you've assembled is excellent. I've stood up here many times and said, you ain't doing it right. This time, you're doing it right. It's been a pleasure to come here. I had some notes, can't remember what I did with them. I came early to see how this place functions. From the greetings I got downstairs and the way the things were cleaned and prepared and the way people addressed us and were concerned about us. The attitude in this organization is excellent. The rest of the world needs to follow the way you've set it up. I thank you for this opportunity of coming and expressing myself. Thank you very much.
So Jason, Murray, thank you for those comments. Great to have the public back at for the first time, as I said, since March of last year. Let's take a look at the committee work plan, and I welcome any comments, changes, edits to minutes of the meeting, et cetera, before we move on. All right, good. There being no changes, I'm going to turn to Jano for a capital program update. Jano.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, I want to acknowledge how good it is to be back in person with all the members of the board, and also to be able to welcome back longtime members of the MTA family, like Mr. Anthony, Mr. Bowden, who have followed our work so closely over the years. So thank you to everybody. And mostly thank you to you, Pat, for helping to make not just the work of the capital program that we track in this committee, but the whole CPOC process, I think, has evolved in a favorable way under your leadership, and I hope that the board will be satisfied with the reports that we are giving, and that we're giving them maybe more focused and more trenchant reports that are relevant to decision making. Today there's obviously the usual bevy of material in the board books, but today we're going to talk about stations. This is an area that we have really prioritized during the COVID period. We're going to be hearing from the gentleman who runs the stations group within the delivery organization of C&D, Barney Gray. Barney came to us over a year ago from Chicago, where he ran the capital program at the Chicago Transit Authority, and he took over responsibility for the stations component of our work. And what we're going to focus on today are two projects that really have advanced during the COVID period. The 8 ADA stations, which was 8 of the 20, remember at the outset of 2020, when we thought that we were going 100 miles an hour on the on the $51.5 billion capital program, we announced that we were moving forward with 23 stations in a package, a very aggressive package. In the end of the day, because of the funding impacts of the COVID period, we dialed that back to 8 stations, but we found federal money and we kept going for those 8 stations. So you're going to be hearing about that. You're also going to be hearing about the 149th Street Grand Concourse complex, which was a project that we actually accelerated during COVID. So while obviously COVID and the financial consequences had a significant impact on the capital program, we're only starting fully to recover from that and catch up with the time that was lost. These are two projects emblematic of the commitment, the continuing commitment to ADA accessibility and to the stations program. So with that bit of background, Barney, may I ask you to, please.
Pat, you asked when you started this segment, do we have any comments on the work plan? In the work plan, there are several references to the Long Island Railroad and Metro-North capital programs, but I'm missing, or I'm just not seeing it, any reference to New York City Transit's capital program.
Well, the presentation that's going to be made shortly is New York City Transit.
But on the agenda of...
Well, no, I think Andrew, if you go to...
Pat?
Yeah.
So the,
Tom.
you know, as we're still transforming, the Long Island Railroad and Metro North business units are partially transformed. Transit's been fully integrated with C&D, and those projects have been coming regularly. If you look back over time.
So that's why it's
you've
not
had-
listed.
Absolutely, yeah. You've had presentations on all the different areas of
I'm right,
transit.
it's not listed, but now we know why it's not listed.
Yeah, and if you look at July overall capital program stations
Yeah.
on the second page of
Yeah,
the work.
stations could have been Metro North and Long Island as well, but
In fairness, what we're doing, Andrew, it is a process, it's still a process that's underway, and there's still some fragmentation of the management of our capital programs based on, you know, the way it was handled in the prior era. But in the stations era, we have made some initial steps towards integration. For example, when we put out the 23 stations, we included Long Island Railroad and Metro North stations, taking advantage of both geography and similarity of scope. So that process of true integration is still underway. It's a good reminder that you offer up. Barney?
Thank you, Jano. Good morning. As Jano indicated, I joined the agency about a year ago, almost at the height of the pandemic. We've been extremely busy during that process, and so today I'm just going to walk you through a few of the things that we are doing and then focus on a couple of projects that just got underway. Yes. So if you look from March to 2020 to June of 2021, we've had 8 contracts. 2 of those packages are for 11 new ADA stations. And then we also included a replacement of 8 escalators and 22 elevators at 17 stations in 5 boroughs. In addition to both the ADA work and the replacement work, we're doing some state of good repair work also. From July to December of 2021, so the remainder basically of this year, we expect to award 8 additional contracts. 2 of those packages are for 10 new ADA stations, and then we have an additional replacement of 16 elevators and 5 elevators at another 11 stations. We'll add to that some circulation improvements at both Flushing and Grand Central. So we talked about sort of what we would highlight today. The ADA package was 8 new ADA stations. That was awarded in December of 2020. We expect that project to be substantially complete July 2023. It's a $347 million project. To date, we're currently about 15% complete. We've advanced the design on 6 of those to 100%, and the other are at 60%, and we'll complete those by the end of the year. So that project is going well, and we continue to progress that. It is a design-build project, so right now utility drawings, commercial agreements, and utilities are underway. We're having those discussions with the various agencies and utilities. As I mentioned previously, the design is 60% complete. Our contractor is developing a construction schedule. We hope to have that soon so we can actually start to progress the work. And then we're proactively mitigating potential risks to keep the project on track. We've seeking a waiver from National Grid to perform some work during the period where they typically don't allow those activities to happen. We feel really good about getting that agreement and that waiver. So fingers crossed. The other project that we kicked off this year during the pandemic was the ADA upgrades at 149th Street in Grand Concourse. Again, this is an ADA project, accessibility at 2 underground stations in the Bronx. This will provide a free ADA transfer between subway lines at 149th Street and Grand Concourse. This project is scheduled to substantially complete in July of 2023. It has a budget of $170 million. This one's about 11% complete, and at this point we foresee no issues with the work on these 2 stations. The restoration and reopening of a historic head house is part of the 149th Street Grand Concourse and Tremont project, and you can see here that this historic site will get an improvement during the advancement of this work as well. We also have additional projects to complete this year, substantial completion on another 18 contracts. is planned. A record 11 of those are ADA subway stations, and those are listed here. Replacement of 4 escalators and 6 elevators at 5 stations is also part of that, and we always include some state-of-good repair work in the program, and that will be occurring at 12 additional stations. And then Mark's flipping through, you can see sort of some of those are highlighted to the right. So again, this year will continue to be busy for us. We expect to complete 5 additional contracts. The rehabilitation of Rutgers Tube will complete that work. An employee facility at 3rd Avenue and 138th is also part of that. We have 3 additional escalators and 6 elevators at an additional 3 stations, and then we'll address some water leaks at 25 subway stations across the system. Yes, please.
So the recent heavy rainfall and all of the press about how we have to weatherproof and, you know, make our stations less susceptible to water. How much of the water that we get from anything is from third-party locations, is from other people who share the station? You know, like an apartment house above it, or a retail store above it, or do we look and make sure that
Yeah.
those third parties are not?
Look, I mean, I think it's a good question, and in light of what we experienced last week, we're going to take another look at it. But what you saw last week was we have this huge sustainability program post Sandy,
Yeah.
that has been properly focused on low-lying areas that are subject to coastal surge. So we've made tremendous progress on that, and we can brief the committee and the board on that anew in future. What you saw in a couple cases was some areas that are a little higher ground, but which have some significant problems vis-a-vis adjacent street drainage and the topography that brought more water into the station. And of course, we have the reality of our very old system that has groundwater penetrations. And there's also a big challenge that we face, which is, you know, we have to work more closely with the city, because the penetrations that are constantly being done by utilities and otherwise create all these openings that water finds its way into. I mean, for example, in Grand Central, just to go on for a moment longer, in Grand Central, we've done an amazing, if you get to Grand Central, the subway mezzanine has been totally transformed. We've grown the size of it. We put in all new finishes, and it looks fantastic. It's a very different experience. We still got a little piece of work to do to replace the ventilators and finish the ceiling. But one area has been, you'll see, is marked off because the utility penetrations and the sidewalk penetrations that have been taking place outside of MTA jurisdiction have created a significant water penetration there. And we're addressing it. We are working with the city, and we're coming up with the money to fix it once and for all ourselves. But it's part of this broader problem that we have to address, which is, you know, when we don't want to be the water collection point for every neighborhood, right, because there are holes in the ground above us. Yes. So that, I hope, goes to your question. We have a broader challenge before us.
Thanks.
I'd just like to close and complete to say, you know, we completed our first ADA project as part of the 2024 capital program. We had that press event last week where we made that station fully ADA accessible. Our program currently is about 40% of the work that we have will be ADA. The rest is spread out between elevators, escalators, renewal and component work, and then various other. So, you know, we're committed to the effort, and we're excited about the work we've completed and the work that we have planned moving forward for both the remainder of this year and into next year.
To that point, I just want to acknowledge my friend Q, our Chief Accessibility Officer, who's here, and together with Board Member Khaleesi has attended virtually every one of these openings and really been very, very strong supporters of the effort. So thank you to them.
Any other questions for Barney or the team on the presentation? All right, good. I'm going to call on the IEC to report on the station's work.
Good morning. I'm Kent Haggis with the IEC, and I want to report on one of the projects, the ADA 8-station project, formerly titled the Accessibility Upgrade at 8 Stations. As this is our first report, let me start with a little background. A design-build contract for this project was awarded to Judd Lau Contracting at the end of December 2020. Design and pre-construction has been underway for 6 months, with substantial completion set for July 2023. To date, the work is 15% complete. The estimate at completion is within budget, and key design elements are on schedule. However, we note that initial construction activities have slipped their preliminary schedule by 3 months, primarily due to the time required to develop commercial agreements with utility companies for this project. The construction schedule for the project is being revised now, and once approved, we'll determine if this slippage has impacted the project's completion date. We have 2 observations to make at this point. With the 2 years to go, the IEC believes that the project's mitigation strategies will avoid any delay to the completion date caused by these utility issues. And as a lesson learned, the IEC suggests that C&D explore business process improvements with the regional utility companies to reduce the risk of delay at the front end of future design build projects. We've also observed that the program management consultant, Hill International, has been very proactive in managing the risks and establishing processes to maintain timely review of the design builder's product. Finally, we want to note that C&D has undertaken several innovations in project delivery with this contract that we'll be looking at closely. First, the work at 8 stations spread across all 5 boroughs is bundled into one contract. Secondly, the elevator manufacturer is part of the design build team and has ongoing long-term maintenance responsibility. And finally, most of the elevators planned in this project are of a machine room-less arrangement. That's a space-saving technical arrangement that is new to New York City Transit. That summarizes my report, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Good. Any questions for the IEC? All right, great. We'll now go on to Tim Mulligan reporting on capital plan status.
We had a second report from Mark Silica,
forgive
who's
me,
also
Tom.
online. Yep.
This is Mark Luke, also from the IEC, and we're reporting on 149th Street, Tremont Avenue Station. This is also the first time the IEC is reporting on this station. The design build contract was awarded to Solid Construction in August 2020. Design construction activities have been underway for approximately 11 months, and substantial completion is July 2023. While the project is currently on schedule, available flow within the schedule has been reduced by prior schedule updates. Recovery efforts made allowing the project to remain on schedule have been accomplished through the resequencing of activities and reducing the durations of the remaining work. This may limit potential options available to the project team to mitigate any schedule delays in the future. The project is also on budget. The forecast PAC aligns with the IEC's analysis of overall budget scopes and expenditures to date. Regarding project risk, the IEC notes that the risks have been well managed by the project team to date. Potential design and construction risks have not materialized. However, the original risk assessment focused only on 149th Street Station. Tremont Avenue Station was added to this project just prior to contract award. Therefore, the IEC suggests that at this point, a quick risk review update be undertaken to revisit existing concerns and also incorporate Tremont Avenue Station. That concludes the IEC's report on this project.
Mr. Chairman, this is Joe DeVito. If anybody had technical difficulty in hearing Mark and his talking points, the board can find our full report on page 15 of the CPOC book. Apologize for any technical difficulties that we just had.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I was going to make that point. Jano.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a couple of issues that we're attacking that these projects have brought to the fore. One is this issue of coordination with utilities, which is a challenge across all of our construction. And in the summer, the utilities basically shut down business because they're dealing with the emergencies related to the cooling requirements of our region. We established about 9 months ago a very high-level task force led by Matt Best, who is our chief engineer, who works with Tim Mulligan, to actually have a regular dialogue at a very high level with Con Ed in particular to make sure that we were looking forward to what the needs of our projects were to head off those kinds of utility-related delays. So I think that is bearing fruit. Certainly East Side Access in particular, which has an enormous amount of electrical turn-ons going on, it has avoided significant impacts, and we're trying to make sure that it works across the system. The other issue is our friends at CUNY. We are frequently in real estate negotiations with our friends at CUNY, and C&D contracts and procurement head Evan Iceland, who also functions as our head lawyer, has established a senior level task force with CUNY to deal with all of these issues. And we've resolved an incredibly long-standing problem with York College that will enable us to get moving the Jamaica Bus Depot, a project that's been sitting around for quite some time and that I would like to make sure that we advance effectively. It's integral to Southeast Queens transportation future. But also in the 149th Street Grand Concourse project, we resolved a long-standing issue with Hostos Community College, and we're close to wrapping up what has been an incredibly long debate with Hunter College about real estate issues related to that very much delayed ADA accessibility project. So, you know, I think that the message I'm trying to convey to the board is that we are attacking issues on a kind of a global approach where we're identifying broad risks, not just on a project basis, and trying to attack them strategically. It's having some, success, but there's many more challenges to come, to be sure. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Jen. I'll turn to Tim for an update on capital program status.
So on page 19 of the CPOC materials, we have the commitment completion report through the second quarter. I'll just highlight the sort of top line on commitments, which are award of contracts. Through the first two quarters, we've committed $1.54 billion of a $2.12 billion target. Most of those commitments that didn't make second quarter will be accomplished in the third quarter. Obviously, this is coming off of the capital plan pause that we had last year and getting back up to having the pre-designed documents for design build ready to hit the street. That is not having us retreat from our goal and ambitions for this year for $6.2 billion worth of commitments. In fact, as Jeno has mentioned at earlier sessions, we're actually supplementing that with other projects that we can try and get out on the street this year to sort of smoothly get rid of the gap and scale up to the full-scale capital program commensurate with the size of the $51.5 billion plan. On completions, similar story through June. We've completed just over $2 billion of about a 3.25 goal, and so all of those, nearly all of those are projected to complete this year, so we're still anticipating 97% of the historic level of $7.2 billion worth of completions for the calendar year.
Tim, I think does bear some explanation for the board. The challenge is that, the completions and commitments are showing the impact of COVID. I mean, we have to be honest that by stopping the program for as long as we did, even though we were knocking out work that was underway, ramping back up to get all the designs ready for this new, more complicated design-build process and putting teams together has been a challenge. The other variable that we need to be honest about is that our new procurement operation we're retraining all of our folks who do procurement to be design-build procurement experts, which is more challenging. It's a more complicated process. It's RFPs, more variables to evaluate, not low bidding alone. And Mr. Iceland has, the challenge of leading that effort. So, we never like to be behind. So I just offer that up by way of explanation, not excuse. And we are, as Tim said, committed to, to catching up in the third quarter. The fourth quarter is a little overweighted right now with completions, and that concerns us. And we're going to try and make sure that we knock out some of those earlier. So that's a little more background. Thanks.
Thanks, General. Questions or comments from committee members? All right, good. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Commissioner Lynn.
First, this is the last. Sorry. If this is the last of the CPOC, it's been terrific working with you on this. I might point out that when I first joined the board a little over 2 years ago, we were discussing committee appointments, and you said to me, I probably don't remember, but you said to me, oh, CPOC is the place you want to be because you see what's happening, and you see what's really happening at the MTA. And I sort of take that to Jano's most recent comment today, where he was saying that all the bevy of material that we get, you like to focus on certain things that you want to bring us up to speed, as opposed to the thousands of pages that we often see. And I really think that focus is spot on. And I'm wondering going forward if that sort of focus could be broadened to the whole board issues of whether we could take specific projects and have more in-depth conversation about them, and not just at sort of the final moment of decision, but bringing us up to speed over a series of meetings. And I sort of come to mind things like the post-COVID capital program and what it's going to look like, and its overlay with congestion pricing, how we're moving forward on congestion pricing. It seems to me things that we could have several board discussions about that, bringing us up to speed. We talk about fares and fare evasion. It seems to me those things, and there's something to be said that if we really had an effective fare evasion program, that would bring in a lot of revenue above the fare increase numbers. And is there a way of marrying these two things, and perhaps one dependent on the other? The hiring timetable and and the bottlenecks that we're facing. These are all things, and overtime that we talk about over and over again. So those are all things that could be projects for board discussion that we talk about on a regular basis, and then when decisions come down the pike, we really focus on them in an in-depth way. And I'm just sort of following the sort of thing that you've brought to CPOC, and think that we ought to think about extending that further into the way the board acts. Thanks.
Bob, thanks for the comments. Do you?
Absolutely, and we've done a couple of East Side Access tours for the board, but I would welcome, actually, Commissioner Lynn, when we talk about a project, there's no reason we shouldn't drag you guys out to see it, because seeing the projects and seeing the team that runs them in all their complexity, I think is very valuable. So I think one idea coming out of your comments is, maybe not every month, but we should ask the committee if it would like to visit the projects that we're going to focus on and get a little more briefing, a little more in-depth into some of the details and see it physically.
Andrew.
Yeah, one of the speakers, the public speakers, mentioned a long gap on the number 6 line between accessible stations. For instance, when we select stations to be part of the next round, do we also judge how far they are from the next accessible station? I know there was at one point a goal of making every other station accessible by a certain year, but some obviously have more criteria, like senior centers or medical facilities by them. So I'm just wondering.
So the original 70 stations emerged from a pretty thoroughgoing, it was before we were in charge of the whole program, but it emerged from a pretty thoroughgoing consultation with the disability community and advocacy community, and the MTA's team that works on that. So from the 70 stations, we chose 23 based on those priorities, which included, the volume of the station, geographic dispersal, and the goal that you're referring to, which is never to have, at least initially, it's not, the long-term goal is to have the whole station be fully accessible. So everybody's looking at the same map. But the goal of having everybody be within 2 stations of an accessible station. So that goal, along with some of the other variables I mentioned, and in consultation with the disability community, was how we got to the 70 stations, the 23 stations, and the others that we're advancing right now.
Distances between platforms, like the reference that was made to 4th Avenue and 9th Street, where 9th Street is way down and 4th Avenue is quite a few steps up.
As
Things like
always,
that.
you have some specific knowledge that I can't speak to, but yes, it was physical issues, but also the issues of equity and and geographic fairness and access for the disability community. That continues to be our standard for how do we advance it on a priority basis. And I'm sorry to go on, but I just add that we had some projects, and part of it was which projects had design, which stations we were far enough along in the design to really kickstart it when we had decided to use the federal money during COVID.
Anybody else? So Bob, Andrew, thanks for those comments. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor? Thank you all.